Hey everybody, we are live. My name is Melanie Richmond. I am your well-being coach with True North Wellbeing Coaching, where we help driven professionals like you get to your next level career and life goals by optimizing your well-being. And today we have a very special guest, Jasmine Shaw. She's also a fellow engineer, and we are talking about elevating yourself as a woman in STEM. So Jasmine, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, so let's start with some very basics. So, what does it mean to be a female in STEM for some of our viewers that aren't familiar with it?
hmm Yeah, so I mean, I guess what it really means to be working in STEM as a woman or a gender minority is, I guess there's a couple things to it. So one is that obviously there are a lot of challenges kind of going against the grain, but there's also so many opportunities. So there's so much happening in tech right now. There's so much happening in engineering. There's so many opportunities for incredible career advancement and growth and learning. So I think it's kind of that balance of there's amazing opportunities and a lot of career pathways that you can carve for yourself, but also some challenges, kind of challenging the status quo. But I think ultimately it comes down to sometimes you get to be a trailblazer, which I think is kind of cool. So even if you are the only woman in the room or on your team or on your project, and there are of course challenges associated with that, it also means that you get to kind of be the first one sometimes and pave the way for the women who come after you, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, and I love how you said it's not just, women in STEM, but also any minority in that group. So I just want to say hi to our viewers that are watching live. So feel free to say hello in the comments, say, what industry you're in. If you're watching from, different platforms, you're going to have to allow StreamYard permission to write comments. So please allow that, and then we're happy to answer them as we are live. Um, so Jasmine, so tell me a little bit about your story. Like, what got you so interested about, really elevating minorities or females in STEM?
hmm Yeah, so a little bit about, I guess, my background and kind of my journey about how I got here. So I'm a professional engineer, so I studied biomedical engineering. I graduated 6 years ago now, and ever since I started my career, I always kind of had this, actually even before my career, like even in my undergraduate days, I was always passionate about community building, contributing to the engineering community, supporting fellow engineering students. And then after I graduated, then it kind of pivoted a bit into supporting fellow women engineers. And it really came up because I noticed that I was getting a lot of opportunities, a lot of career growth, but then, women who I worked with on the same team, we were cube mates, they were experiencing different challenges than I was, and they didn't have access to the same opportunities. So I found that it was kind of inconsistent in terms of how women progressed within their careers and their profession. And I was lucky in that I had mentors and sponsors who really elevated me and provided me with the opportunities to grow, but it wasn't the same for everyone. So that
So
really bothered me.
let's
Okay.
pause right there. So I think like you
Yeah.
made a really good point. So you talked about how you had somebody who made beside you who's also a female engineer, early in their career, but weren't getting that same opportunity. So that to me is like, okay, why is that? And then you mentioned you had sponsors and mentors. And
hmm
maybe if you can talk a little bit about that, because I think it's so important to understand, a mentor really helps you with your development, your growth, and they can help based on their experience or asking you the right questions and encouraging you to take that next step. And then a sponsor is kind of somebody that's is going to talk about you when you're not in the room and going to
hmm
say like, oh, this person would be great for this role or this opportunity. So it's so important to have those people within your career growth to help you grow. So I just wanted to pause there and mention that to our audience. um, so then what happened? So you were getting those opportunities, your other QMains were not, and what did you do about it?
Yeah, so that's when, so this was pretty early in my career, so maybe 2 years in. So at this point, I started getting more engaged in the like women in STEM community. I So at that time, I was actually doing my Master's of Applied Science, and I was studying Technovation, which is a global technology entrepreneurship program for girls. And this was really to examine more of like, I guess, the kind of how this international program was set up to enable girls to develop interest and kind of passion for technology at a young age, and what like the, I guess, institutional kind of design was that enabled this program to, have over 20,000 girls go through it. Like what was really successful about it. So that was something I was interested in from like a systems level, but then on like an individual level, I just started talking to more women. I started kind of sharing this story that I'm sharing with you now on in different forums for us, and really just kind of building up like a network of other women in STEM who are both passionate about just like building a community and also kind of lifting each other up. And then it kind of all just it was kind of a snowball effect. Like one thing I did would lead to another, it would lead to a new connection, and I started just getting more and more involved. So I eventually served on the board of directors of the Society of Women Engineers Ottawa, and then that opportunity led me to connect with many other women in STEM groups. So, women in communications and technology, WinSet, Squist, all these groups across Canada that are doing stuff in the women in STEM space. I started to connect with them and really get a sense of like across the board what initiatives and events and programs and resources were in place to support women in STEM. And then I kind of realized that there were still gaps in terms of some of the resources because I had this like kind of broad view of like the entire landscape, and I realized there were still gaps. So at that point, this was about 2 years ago, so I had finished my master's, and then I kind of wanted to explore entrepreneurship because that's really what my master's program was in. It was in technology entrepreneurship. So I started asking like, how can I combine this passion and interest I have in elevating women in STEM with entrepreneurship? Like, could this become a little side business? And I realized that the gap I was talking about was really for early career women in STEM. So people who have either just graduated or maybe a year out of school, they're really struggling to find support networks, to actually connect with these groups that exist, and to really get the kind of like support and encouragement early on in their careers that can be really pivotal in kind of shaping the rest of their career. So that's why I started creating content on social media that's inspirational, educational, to just kind of debunk common myths and basically what it's like to work in STEM as a young woman. And then I also created my flagship program, which is basically a career boot camp for early career women in STEM that I'm piloting right now. So yeah, that's kind of some of the.
So
Go ahead.
thanks for sharing that, Jasmine. I see we have a couple people commenting, watching live. So hi Elvira, hi Jocelyn for tuning in. Feel free to drop any questions as they come. But Jasmine, that's a very inspirational journey to date, and it goes to show that there's a lot of movement with elevating women in STEM, and like you mentioned, all of those communities that you were,
Mm-hmm.
got involved with. And for somebody that hasn't been exposed to what it's like being in a minority setting, like I'll share a little bit of my own personal story. I graduated from engineering in 2012, and I went up to Fort McMurray to work on a construction site as a new engineer, new EIT. And I was on a construction site with 100 people, over 100 people, and there was only one other female on site. So talk about not only being the only female in a boardroom, but like being an only female in a construction site, where already there's already like a gender stereotypical, more male dominated workers. And I felt so uncomfortable. And I recently just published an article about this with Building Good. So that's on my LinkedIn if anybody wants to have a read. But basically, it felt so uncomfortable being a small minority in that setting in particular. And I experienced things that were very discriminative in terms of like they saw me as a female, so they assumed I was a different role than what I was. So they assumed that I was less technical. And even back in those days, which was, 10 over 10 years ago, they allowed, like, they had construction site trailers with like, nude photos um, in the construction trailers, which also doesn't make you feel comfortable as a minority on site. So those things have progressed and we have seen changes, but it just gives you an idea as to how it can be so uncomfortable being a minority. And even in an office setting, when you're sitting in those boardrooms and you're the only one at the table. And I saw some memes recently posted on social media about like in governance or um, if you take out all the males in the picture and then you only have a few females that are left. And sometimes, yeah, it's less than 2%. So it can be really challenging to, have the courage to speak up and, say what's on your mind because as, a minority and as, half of the population is female or who identify as female, we have a lot to say and that makes a big impact in how we shape and create the world. So I just wanted to add that in. Do you have anything else to share about your experience, Jasmine? I know it was like very beneficial off the get-go. You had really good mentorship, but was there any struggles in particular that you came by that you had to overcome?
Mhm. I think well, first of all, thank you for, for your candor and sharing that. I know that um, that's difficult, especially when like it's in that environment, like it can often get very like toxic when, especially like on site. Like I've heard stories from other women. So um yeah, I'm sorry you had to go through that. And I do hope it is changing in terms of like construction sites and the really the safety for women, because especially when yeah, like nude photos and stuff like that can get very dangerous very quickly.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it was shocking. It's absolutely shocking because I'm,
yeah,
a 20-year-old or
yeah,
yeah. So it was interesting, but I think there's a lot more policies now with construction companies on
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. I think my like I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like I've had a pretty good experience so far, like working in engineering and in tech. I think the only really like challenges I face specifically that I've kind of perceived have come from like a gendered perspective or a gendered bias had to do with like career advancement and wanting to move into like more senior positions, and kind of getting pushback in terms of being too ambitious. I remember being called too ambitious and being told several times like I needed more experience before I could progress into a management position, even though that same guidance wasn't being given to some men who were colleagues of mine. So I think those biases certainly still exist, like as women try
Mhm.
to progress and kind of climb the career ladder, so to speak. There's expectations that you have to be super technical before you can move into a management position, or a leadership position, which isn't necessarily that doesn't mean you'll be a good fit for that position. Like I know many folks who are either like people managers or project managers who don't necessarily have like super in-depth technical experience, but they're amazing managers because they're empathetic, they have really high emotional intelligence, they're good listeners, they really understand their team and their people, and they rely on technical experts. They don't have to be the technical expert to be a good manager, but it seems like for women there's a double standard that like you have to not only be an amazing leader, but you also have to be exceptionally technical. So I think those kinds of biases still exist, and that's
Yeah,
definitely one that I faced.
and I'm going to add to that as a mother with like a high career. There's also the bias of like, oh, you're pursuing elevating yourself or, moving up, like you said, the career ladder, or whatever your aspirations are in whatever role you want. It doesn't have to be climbing up, it can be lateral, whatever it is. But to be able to have, a high career, high impact, and still be, a mother, like there's that thing in society where they think that, oh, you have to choose one or the other. And I'm a strong believer that you don't. And especially being a woman, that's often part of your career journey if you choose to have kids. And I love what you also said about how it is changing, and there's opportunities for women as well. So maybe we could touch on that, like what's happening in the movement for women in STEM right now, and what initiatives are coming forth to help prevent somebody that is qualified for a role but might not be getting that promotion.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So there's a lot going on in like the women in STEM movement, and I have kind of mixed feelings about it. So on one hand, there's so many organizations and groups that are dedicated to supporting, um, recruiting, retaining, and elevating women in STEM. So a couple of years ago, I kind of went on this journey to really like map out this whole landscape. So basically, I made kind of like a network map and then a list of all the groups that I could find in Canada that are doing women in STEM stuff. And there's over 50 of them. So on one hand,
Wow.
that's amazing because we need like the diversity of groups because not, if you want to join a network or a community, like not every network will kind of be for you. Or there's ones that are specialized, like there's ones for immigrant women, for women of color. So having niche communities is important. But the thing that I noticed is that they tend to work in silos, and there's a lot of overlap, which again is okay, but also um, there's opportunity to have a bigger like systemic impact by collaborating. So that's something that
Mhm.
I've been working on for a while through this project called Ecosystem. So I'm working with some amazing women in STEM, and we're basically trying to kind of bring all these groups together to collaborate and to like share resources and knowledge and best practices, so that collectively all of the energy, which is probably tens of thousands of hours a year going into women in STEM, it actually has a bigger impact. Because if we look at like just the numbers, for example, of women in engineering, it is going up. I think it's like at 23% now
Okay.
graduating, which is good, but it's like not accelerating in terms of like the
Do you
the
know the
rate.
retention number? Like what is it 10 years into
Oh,
the
it's a lot
career?
lower.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot lower than that. So yeah, like collective impact is really important at this point, and really identifying like what are the initiatives that are the most impactful in terms of actually like recruiting and then retaining women in STEM, and then focusing our mostly volunteer efforts on that. So that's like kind of one piece of it. But on the other hand, like it's amazing because there are so many people, talking about it and working on it and who are passionate about it, which is awesome. And it's become, I think, more mainstream as well, like especially in social media. Kind of like I would say the generation after me, like Gen Z, like they are really kind of leveraging social media and like TikTok to really highlight and showcase what it's like to be a woman in STEM or a woman engineer. So I've seen some really awesome and innovative content come out of that. So um, yeah, there's a lot of movement happening. And I think it is encouraging. I would just like to see more collective impacts. That's something I'm trying to drive. Like that's one of my focuses. And then obviously I do like kind of more individual like coaching as well through my side business and through my career bootcamp program. So I'm kind of trying to have an impact where I can, both like by working with early career women and then also kind of at the system level, trying to bring together groups to have a bigger impact.
Hmm. So if somebody is, looking at, like, I think you mentioned it earlier as an example, like often females, they're held to kind of a double standard of like having that technical expertise and also having all of the right leadership skills in order to get that managerial role. Whereas men maybe might not need as much of it in order to get that role because for some reason we have this unconscious bias of in industries and not just in STEM, I would say, of men, they look more at the potential within that person, whereas
Yeah.
in females, they want to see the experience, which
Yeah.
isn't necessarily always the case because how are you going to grow? The only way to grow is to actually do it and to
Yeah.
do it again and again and get that practice. And then you become the expert. And that's like anything in life. You pick up an instrument, you're not going to be good off the get go. You got to
Yeah.
practice, right? So, how can we change, that unconscious bias and surface it so that we are giving more opportunities to females.
Mhm. Yeah. It's a tough question. So I think there's two sides of this, and I think we kind of need to work on them like at the same time. So the one
Mhm.
side is like the change the system, and then the other side is like change the women. And I'm not a big fan of change the women, but it kind of seems like both are happening at the same time. So maybe not change the women, maybe educate or like empower. Maybe that might be a better way to phrase it. But the change the system side is like to actually change, your promotion policy. So that's a project I actually worked on in my former company. I actually initiated this process, and it was kind of an EDI and engineering combination project where we were revamping our engineering promotion processes because we found that it was exactly that. It was based on potential, or sorry, it was the so the process was basically designed such that you had to demonstrate um, capabilities at like the next level before you could be promoted to the next level, which is kind of counterintuitive because it's like, well, if I'm a junior engineer and I want to be promoted to an intermediate engineer, I need to already be doing the things that an intermediate engineer is
Mhm.
doing. So it's kind of weird because it's like, well, but I'm not there yet. The whole point is that like I should show potential and capability, not necessarily have to prove that I've already done it. So um, and it was very interesting to work on that because we found like there was a lot of that unconscious bias kind of built into um, the culture there that like a lot of these people who were on the promotion review board expected that people need to demonstrate ability before being promoted. But we also found through the survey that we did, actually surveying engineers and their experiences with the promotion process, that this wasn't necessarily applied fairly across the board, and that some
Mhm.
people noticed that certain people, certain managers tended to promote their employees, you know, I guess not evenly across the board. So actually going at it from like the process and policy level and changing like your criteria for promotions, and ensuring that it's applied like fairly across the board, ensuring that the people who are reviewing promotions, that there's representation from different communities on promotion review boards, so you don't just get one perspective. So those are all important things that need to be done, and you can apply the same kind of methodology for hiring practices, for training within companies, for like recruitment, for all kind of aspects of um, people development.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the system side, and then the people side I think is really equipping women and other underrepresented groups with the information of how to get ahead and how to succeed in your career, which is kind of what I'm doing, which is
So tell us a little bit more about that. And I think that
yeah.
would fall into the program and the coaching that you do for
Mhm.
early career women in STEM.
Yeah, for sure. So some of the topics that I cover are building confidence. So, for example, explain the differences between confidence and self-confidence, and like growth zones and learning zones, and how to really build self-confidence by taking actions that push you into the learning and growth zones, and also kind of reinforcing, I guess, just mindsets and mentalities that it's okay to not be an expert, like even though there is kind of this pressure that as women you need to work twice as hard like for half the reward, that it's okay if you don't know everything. It's okay to go into a meeting and ask a question, and to not know the answers to everything. It's okay to ask for help. So just kind of normalizing some of that experience, because um, I found that we tend to, obviously, generally speaking, we tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves to know everything and to, have all the answers. And I've found that, in fact, not knowing the answers and asking really good questions is actually a sign of understanding. Because if you're able to look at a problem from a different perspective and ask really poignant questions, that might lead to really interesting insights about the problem that someone else didn't consider. So questions are actually really powerful, and I try to highlight that.
I
But
just want
also,
to pause there because I'm really big into taking that time to ask the right questions, because
yeah,
if you don't take the time to ask the right questions, you're never going to come up, with those really impactful solutions and answers. So, yeah, that's amazing. And I didn't want to cut you off there, but so
okay.
in terms of um, somebody, let's say somebody is new in their career, they have a lot they want to say, but they might be a little bit more shy, being the only female in the room, or a minority. So in terms of building confidence, so you said like taking action, and I actually did a live with somebody else about confidence in general, because some people have this false belief that it is, you just got to believe in yourself. And I don't believe that. Like, I really think it comes down to taking those small actions that you're going to get better at it, and you're going to get feedback from it that is going to build yourself up. So if somebody wants to speak up in a boardroom or in a big meeting room, or wants to do a presentation, is there anything that you help them with, or like role playing, or what's involved in your program to try and change their mindset on it?
Hmm. Yeah. So first is to really understand, like, do you have any like kind of mind blocks or like limiting beliefs that are actually preventing you from doing that? So when you want to maybe put yourself out there, like, what are some of the maybe the excuses that come up? What are the like the what ifs? I find they tend to come in the form of what if, or like, oh, I shouldn't do this because of reason. So actually being able to kind of like identify those when they come up, and then kind of breaking them down and understanding like where does it actually come from, and like is it useful to me to have this belief. And
Yeah,
that's not an
yeah.
easy process. That's like, for me, it's taken years to kind of debunk some of those, but
And
just
I,
being
I
able
like to
to.
call I like to call that person the inner critic. So it's
Yes,
that person within
exactly.
you that's giving you that negative self-talk.
Yep.
And Jasmine and I are actually in a tech stewardship program, and I was reviewing a module this week about how our industry have like different values that we value, that we're more skewed towards. And in engineering, I would say like the technical aspect is very valued. So if, let's say, you're like me and Jasmine, that are more general but less technical base, but very good with people, bringing that aspect to the table brings so much value if most of the company is so technical based. Because at the end of the day, like, clients, they want an experience, they want to be heard, they want to be understood, and they want a certain service delivered, right? And they want to be understood. So I think it's really good to understand, like, when that inner critic voice is coming in, it might be coming from like, well, I'm not like everyone else. And you're not supposed to be. Like, you have your unique ability that you bring to the table, that having that diverse perspective makes the company so much more impactful, powerful, and able to sustain, what's next. And I see that in so many areas, that because you're different, it shouldn't mean that you don't ask the question or don't say something. It's really a reason to say something, because
Hmm.
that view is so important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's why I think it all starts with like the mindset, because you really have to like um, actually like kind of embody that and believe that like what you are saying is valuable. And I feel like this applies to many areas of life. Is like, you have to sell yourself first. You have to sell yourself on your ideas. You have to sell yourself on your value, on whatever you're bringing to the table. If you've sold yourself and you're like, yeah, this is awesome, like this presentation I'm doing is freaking amazing, like why wouldn't everyone else love it? Then like it's a lot easier to sell other people, because you're like,
Mm.
trying to convince yourself. You have to convince yourself first, and then it's easy to convince other people because you're just kind of explaining it to them. You're not, it doesn't really feel like pitching, you're just talking about it.
Yeah, I would even like remove convincing yourself, because I think in life you shouldn't have to convince anyone.
Mm.
I think people are very strong in, they know what they want, and they kind of follow their gut, their heart. So I think if you're heart centered and you're doing it from the right place, and it's really coming from a good energetic spot, that's going to show itself in the delivery. And
Mm-hmm.
people sense not what you say, but your energy behind it too. So I think that has a huge impact on drawing people in, getting people on board with the movement or whatever the delivery is that you're doing, and it's coming from the right place.
Mm-hmm. I love that term, heart center. That's a great term. Yeah.
Yeah, so at True North, we're all about aligning ourselves with our inner heart space and our
Mm-hmm.
values. And we bring the well-being component into the corporate world. And I've gone through my struggles as an engineer in my minority setting. And that made me lose track of a lot of myself. And that's what really got me to recenter myself and come from a place of, passion, authentic. And that's why I'm on camera with you today. So,
Yeah, I love
and do
that.
the work that I do. So, Jasmine, we're just at the half-hour mark. So, if people want to reach out and connect with you, ask any questions, what's the best way?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the opportunity to do a little plug. So folks can check out my website. So it's just jasmineshaw.ca. You can subscribe to my newsletter. I do monthly newsletters, just chatting about what's going on kind of in my business and my life, a little behind the scenes. And then if you're looking for more regular content, as well as my own talk show, which Melanie will be on tomorrow, then you can check me out on Instagram. It's Jasmine A. Shaw, Jasmine A. Shaw on all platforms, really. So feel free to check me out there. But yeah, feel free to, reach out either on Instagram or through my website. You can find my contact information for my email if you want to connect and chat about, your career, or if you're just looking for more insights or learning more about my career or anything like that. I'm more than happy to chat.
So we'll drop some of those in our comments on the different platforms. And then I would love to stay connected because I'd love to hear more about that collaborative piece that you're bringing all of the platforms together for women in
Yes.
STEM, because I think that's crucial because we might as well put our efforts together, like you said, to have like a bigger change, a bigger impact. Is there any last words or anything that comes to mind that you want to leave our audience with?
Mm. Um, I would say, just back to the piece about like asking questions and kind of building confidence. I would say once you do it once, like anything really, whether it's asking a question, doing a presentation, or doing anything kind of scary, once you do it once, then you really start to get that kind of validation and the receipts, so to speak, that like, okay, I've done it once, I can do it again. That's really how you build self confidence, is like doing something new for the first time and really kind of trusting that you'll be able to figure it out, even if you haven't done it before. Like if it's your first time you're doing a group presentation, then you can't really rely on anything in your past. You really just have to put yourself out there and try it. But once you do it once and you realize it's not so scary, then that skill of saying, you know what, I can try this, even though I may not be an expert, or this may be out of my kind of domain. I can try it and I can figure it out. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that is kind of the mindset that has enabled me to really accelerate and grow in my career, is just trying things and not getting so hung up on the outcome, and instead just focusing on what I'm going to learn. And that's really how I've grown in my career, and how I continue to open myself up to new opportunities and to learn and to meet amazing people. So I think that's what I would leave people with.
I love that, Jasmine. And I have a saying that I often write in emails that, and I say it a lot, it's you got to go for it. And like Wayne Gretzky says, you miss 100% of the
Yes,
shots you don't take, right? So
exactly.
you gotta try. And
Exactly.
yeah, I see Elvira wrote great talk. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Thank
Again,
you.
my name's Melanie Richmond. We had Jasmine Shaw here today. And reach out. Would love to jump on a connect call if you want to chat some more about being a female minority. All right. Bye bye.
Thanks so much for having me, Melanie. Bye, everyone.